South Africa's Justice Minister is expected to appear before Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development on Friday to be questioned over an alleged link to the VBS Bank scandal. One of the parties that has been driving action is ActionSA, and its Parliamentary caucus leader, Mr. Athol Trollip, is with us now. Welcome, Athol.
Hello, Chris. Thanks very much for having me on your show.
Okay, tell us what your party has done so far.
Well, first of all, like any South African or journalist or anyone who reads the news, on Monday morning we read the story that Paulie van Wyk had put out, joining some dots around the Minister of Justice, Ms. Simelane. And immediately the red flags went up for us because, conflict of interest for somebody in a position like hers is a major problem. But this issue is about a number of conflicts of interest. First of all, Ms. Simelane was the mayor of Polokwane when Polokwane unlawfully invested around 350 million rand into the VBS Bank. So there she had a conflict of interest. And then as soon as the commission started flowing to the brokerage or the person who invested the money on behalf of the municipality, she then took out a loan. Now, that could not be coincidental. And that's what pricked my interest at first, because one, as the mayor, she should never have allowed this to happen. And two, she should then not have been seeking to make a loan from the brokerage that had invested money illegally, because not only did the elderly lose their life savings in VBS, many municipalities lost millions, hundreds of millions of rands, and those are taxpayer rands. So she facilitated the investment. She obviously okayed it, and then she made a loan to buy a coffee shop. And I then took a number of steps. The first step that I took, Chris, was to write to the public protector to ask her for an urgent independent investigation. She wrote back within 2 or 3 days to say that she would respond to me within 10 days. So I'm expecting a response this week. But just to avoid any feigning of not knowing what's going on, I also wrote to the president to inform the president that I'd asked the public protector for this independent and urgent investigation. And I think that's what probably prompted the president to call the minister to come and explain to him. But then to take it one step further, I also wrote to the speaker because I asked one of my staff to do some investigation and go onto the executive members' declarations to see whether she had actually ever declared this loan and the terms of the loan, and whether she declared the coffee shop or bistro that she bought with this money. We couldn't find that. So I wrote to the speaker to ask the speaker to provide me with that with her declaration as soon as she became a minister in this term of office. But in her previous term, she was also a minister. She wasn't the Minister of Justice, but she was around before. So it's very interesting to see whether she did declare that, because if anything is above board, it should be easy to declare. But if it's not above board, people generally don't declare it until they get caught. So what then happened was last week there was a question by a member of the Democratic Alliance to the Minister of Justice as to why was it possible for the United States of America to secure a prosecution of a Mr. Ayres who was found guilty of corruption and corrupting SAA officials. He was mentioned in the state capture report. So here is the big issue. We've got a foreign country that has found one of their own guilty of corruption for corrupting South Africans, yet we, who set up the Zondo Commission into state capture for all the many very good reasons or bad reasons, we haven't been able to secure prosecution yet. Curiously, when that question was put, the minister was in the House, in Parliament, but she didn't answer the question. She asked her deputy minister to answer the question, which immediately raised even more suspicion. And I then asked a follow-up question to say, would it not be much better or more proper for the Department of Justice to be relieved of a minister who's under a cloud of suspicion, and that she should either be suspended or stepped down until proven innocent? Now, what we don't want and we don't trust, whether she appears before the ANC's Integrity Commission or whatever it's called, is neither here nor there. Whatever explanation she gives to the president, as far as we're concerned, is neither here nor there, because we don't trust any of that stuff. I mean, even the president himself is under a cloud around the pala foreign currency that was stolen from his couch. Now, in my own understanding, if money is not dirty, it gets kept in the bank or in your wallet. But why would you keep money in a couch? To me, the obvious explanation is that money is dirty and you're hiding it in a place where you think that nobody will look for it. So the president himself is not beyond reproach. So we want this to be opened up in public. And in fact, we need it to be opened up in public because we as South Africans need a Minister of Justice who's completely beyond reproach, because the Minister of Justice also presides over the National Prosecuting Authority. And let me give you a shocking statistic. I've just written to the Minister herself today to ask her what she's doing in a parliamentary question, what she's doing about the fact that in the High Court in Johannesburg, in Gauteng, there's now a 5-year backlog to get a court date. So if you break the law, Chris, in Gauteng, and you go to the Johannesburg High Court, and the National Prosecuting Authority wants to prosecute you, they will get a date in 2029. Now, you can imagine that if the Minister of Justice, sorry, that is my light going off automatically because I haven't moved for a while. If the Minister of Justice is to preside over a matter that affects her, she might delay it interminably until 2059. So we can't have that. Sorry, it was a long interlude.
No, quite. I saw somewhere that this coffee shop of hers in Sandton was apparently not very busy and often closed early. I don't know if that is correct. I don't know whether you've heard anything.
I did read it. I read exactly the same story. The coffee shop or bistro is in Fredman Place or Palace or Fredman something in Sandton. And when I read that article, I thought, this has all the hallmarks of money laundering, where you have ostensibly a coffee shop, but it doesn't really operate as a coffee shop. I mean, in that story, the people are saying that the manager arrives once or twice a week and leaves early and that there are never really many people in there. So, look, this story has got many red flags about it, and that's why it's more important than ever before that the minister gets held to account. And she needs to be held to account in a court of law. That's the only place that's going to have any credibility.
Right. Athol, while I have you here, may I take you to the coalition controversy in Tshwane, where residents are anxiously awaiting a call from ActionSA to see which way the city is going to go. Can you give us an update, please?
Yeah, look, I can. I'm just going to give you a rather generic background because I'm not in Tshwane or in Gauteng, but I am a member of the Senate, and we've had in-depth discussions about what's going on there. Look, politics is a very fraught environment right now, and things have changed a lot since May 29th of May, the election. So all political parties have reevaluated their positions. For example, there are people now in government with the ANC who also vowed never to govern in the ANC. And there was the issue between the DA and the PA that actually brought the government of Joburg to its knees because the DA refused to work with the PA. And now they're together in the government of national unity. So there's some history there. We're very sad that the DA walked out of the government in Johannesburg. It was their own mayor, Mpopelatsi, in those days. And they left Johannesburg to its own devices. And we had a number of mayors, Capello, followed by Kwamanda, who were just clearly an abject disaster and not good for the city. And now in Tshwane, there's a perception that the municipality is doing quite well. Even the Auditor General, despite some negative findings, generally have said it's one of the better performing, if not the second best performing metro in the country. We are also part of that government. We have a deputy mayor there. In fact, we've been in that coalition since before Cillier Brink arrived in Tshwane. He was a member of the National Assembly. So we are essentially part of that government. The ANC have been trying to get into that government for a long time. And they're responsible largely for the mess that Tshwane is in because they were in government for a long, long time before the DA and then a coalition government. And even the DA had a checkered track record in Tshwane. Let's be very frank about that. There were a couple of dodgy mayors there, and there was a quick succession of mayoral musical chairs. And so Tshwane has had a lot of its own problems, but there is some improvement, and there's a perception that that government's doing well. But I said recently to somebody that, hurt people hurt people. And the people of Tshwane have found it very difficult working with the DA. And the DA has got a track record of being quite arrogant in government. And, interestingly, the Freedom Front Plus have voted against the DA in a number of governments in the Western Cape for the same reasons, for haughtiness, not treating partners, properly, etc. So we experienced a similar experience that Cillier Brink might be going through right now. When we were in the coalition, we were supposed to get the position of Speaker in Tshwane. And when the voting took place, all the DA councillors spoiled their ballots. And the Speaker that was then elected was not an ActionSA Speaker. It was a Speaker from African Independent Congress who has just been a lackey of the ANC and the EFF since then. And the DA have done nothing to address that situation. So we've got people in our party that say, listen, the DA doesn't honour its agreements, yet they expect everyone else to honour their agreements. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And, we also had some very painful and personal experiences during the multi-party charter negotiations with the DA, where they made all sorts of commitments that they aren't in discussions. They weren't in discussions with the ANC, but it's now come out that they were. So, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of thing, and once bitten, twice shy. So we are very circumspect about our relationship with the DA in Tshwane. And, I just think that we've got to be very careful, all of us, including the DA. The DA should treat its partners better if they want its partners to treat it better. But I also don't think it's prudent in politics to cut one's nose off to spite one's face, because it does nobody any good to do that. So I would appeal to all the people involved in these discussions and negotiations, and if there aren't any discussions and negotiations, that they better start them sooner rather than later, because what the electorate wants is to see parties working together to put their interests first and not the party's interest first. So that's where we are, and I can assure you and to assure your members and listeners and people that are going to watch this podcast that we are involved. We are taking this very, very seriously. And even though our president is currently out of the country, we are in constant contact with each other. And we are currently undergoing a review process in Tshwane, interacting with voters, conducting a poll, having a look at governance successes and governance failures, so that whatever decision we do take, that we'll do it on an informed basis. But what we're not going to do, and what we should never be allowed to happen, is that we are not going to be pushed into emotional confidence because the ANC wants to do it today so that they can get their hands on Tshwane. That should never be the reason to enter into a motion of no confidence.
Well, meanwhile, your party is already in a working arrangement with the African National Congress in Johannesburg. I know it's early days yet, but have you seen any benefits for the voters so far?
Okay, that's a very interesting observation, because after the 29 elections, we didn't go into the government of national unity. I head up a caucus in the National Assembly, and we took a decision as a party that we would be a constructive opposition. And I told Cyril Ramaphosa right from the first day that we will support the government where we can, and we'll hold them to account where we can't. And where we find ourselves right now, I think, is ideally situated in South African politics, because you've got an amalgamation of parties that have been around for the past 30 years in the government of national unity. And you've got an amalgamation of parties that call themselves the progressive caucus, but when in actual fact they really are a regressive caucus. And they've been around for 10 years, and one of the parties, MK, only for about 6 months. So we are slap bang in the middle, and I think we are going to be the fulcrum of South African politics, because we're neither in the one or the other, and we can be objective and hold both to account. In Johannesburg, we took a decision that we would go into a cooperative agreement but not take up executive positions with the ANC, because the ANC have got some dodgy partners there. So we've said we will go in and support them on an issue-by-issue basis as long as we can get the speaker position because that controls the legislature, and a couple of chairman positions of portfolio committees, because that's where you really hold the government to account. So we're not in government with the ANC, but we have a cooperative agreement so that we can put Johannesburg first. In Tshwane, we are in a coalition with the DA and the Freedom Front Plus and I think one other party. And, we've got a really smart mayor. He's a mayor. Cillier Brink is a smart guy. And we've got a very smart deputy mayor. And I believe that the perception is that people believe they're getting the job done. And if you can get the job done under the current political environment, then the voters and the ratepayers of Tshwane are receiving the best deal. And we need to always look at that. If the deal's not great and it needs to be relooked, then do so. But always try and put people first.
Okay. I just want to ask you, I noticed earlier that you had renewed your call for lifestyle audits to fight corruption. What inspired you to make that call again?
Well, there's so many things, Chris. If you read the Sunday papers, and I know some of the stories are salacious and you never know what to believe, but, I read some stories about past ministers who own 100 coal trucks. Now, to buy 100 coal trucks, those vehicles cost anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million rand. So let's say you own 100 of them, it's 200 million rand. Where does someone with a ministerial salary get to own 200 coal transportation trucks? The next question that flows from that is, no wonder the railway lines are broken and vandalized and made inoperable, because if you want to run the trucks on the road and make money out of it, then you must make sure that the rail doesn't work. So these are the things that go off in my mind. And, in many developed countries or developing countries, bulk freight like coal and manganese is not allowed to be transported on the road. That's why you actually have rail systems. And South Africa, for all of its past sins, had one of the most sophisticated developed rail networks in the whole country. And now it just doesn't work because it's not in the interests of the people who are making the decisions. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason was, I think like you and many other South Africans, read a story about a CFO, a chief financial officer of a municipality, who's going through a divorce with his wife, and she wants 240 or 50,000 rand a month alimony. Now, that's quite curious because the guy only earns about 120, and I say only with my tongue in my cheek. The guy earns 120,000 a month, which is one hell of a salary, but his wife wants 240,000. And in order to justify that, she tells the court that they live in an 18 million rand mansion. They have a number of supercars that they drive about in, that they go on shopping sprees for their son for 88,000 rand, where he got a 15,000 rand hairdo and 15,000 rand sneakers and so on. And then they go overseas periodically and they only travel first class and this kind of thing. And then immediately you've got to ask yourself, well, how do they sustain that? And, we've got a president who promised us in his first term that he would have lifestyle audits of all the people in government, especially his cabinet ministers. We haven't seen the outcome of those. Now, the reality is nothing's going to change in South Africa until something changes drastically. And what you need to do is you need to make an example. So, if I can think of Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, he made a couple of commitments, and one of the commitments was that he was going to stop corruption. He didn't say, I'm going to try and, ameliorate or reduce corruption. He was going to stop corruption. And the first minister went overseas without declaring his trip with a multinational company. When he landed at the airport back in Singapore, he was arrested and sent to jail. And he protested and said he'd done nothing wrong, like everyone says, like Minister Simelane says she's done nothing wrong. Everyone protests their innocence. I've never known of a criminal to say, yes, I'm guilty, until they're pushed into a corner where they either plead guilt or, become state witness. He was sentenced to jail, that minister, because Lee Kuan Yew wanted to make an example. So if we want to change the way people conduct themselves in this country, we need a couple of tall trees to be blown over. We need a minister to be exposed for living beyond their means. We need a municipal manager to be exposed for living beyond their means. Now, things are starting to happen. My media officer has just told me right now that a former Eskom employee has been sentenced to 15 years in jail for falsifying his qualifications in order to access a senior position. Now, I'm excited about that, because if an official can be sent to jail for 15 years for falsifying their qualifications, imagine what we can do to these people who live in 18 million rand homes and live the kind of lifestyle that the CFO does. You could send him to jail for the rest of his life. And those are the kind of examples that we need in South Africa.
Thank you. That was Athol Trollip, ActionSA's parliamentary leader, speaking to BizNews about corruption and coalitions. And I'm Christine. Thank you, Athol.
Thank you very much, Chris.